Welcome back to Reformed Thinking. It is good to be back at the table.
It is always a pleasure to be here.
We have a very specific mission today. We're looking at theology, but not the kind that just stays in a book.
Right.
We're looking at theology that hits the pavement, the kind that shapes how we actually live and breathe and interact with people on a Tuesday afternoon.
Which is, in my view, the only kind of theology that really counts. If it stops at the brain and never reaches the hands or the heart, it's just an intellectual game.
Completely agree. And to do that, we are going back to the well. We're pulling down a text from one of the heavyweights of history. We're looking at Jonathan Edwards.
The New England Puritan, 1703 to 1758. A giant of the faith, to put it mildly.
Now, before we even crack this text open, I feel like we have to perform a bit of an exorcism. Because the moment I said the name Jonathan Edwards, I know what popped into the heads of about 90% of our listeners.
Oh, I can guess. A spider. Dangling over a flame.
A loathsome insect held over a fiery pit.
Sinners in the hands of an angry God.
That's the one. It's the sermon everyone reads in high school American Lit class. And you get this picture of Edwards as this sadistic, knuckles-white preacher who just delighted in dangling people over hellfire and watching them squirm.
Yeah.
A powerful image, I get it, but it's a bit of a caricature, isn't it?
It's a massive caricature. It's like judging an entire filmmaker by one scary scene in one movie. If you actually look at the corpus of Edwards' work, and we are talking volumes upon volumes here, you don't find a man obsessed with hate.
Right.
You find a man who was absolutely intoxicated by beauty. He was obsessed with what he called excellency, with harmony, and specifically with love.
Which is why I think today's text is going to be so disorienting for some people. We aren't looking at sinners in the hands of an angry God. We're looking at what is essentially its polar opposite.
We're looking at a sermon titled The Spirit of Love, the Opposite of an Angry or Wrathful Spirit. And honestly, if you want to understand the Reformed view of the human heart, this sermon is a masterclass. It's moral anatomy.
Moral anatomy. I like that. It sounds surgical.
It is surgical. Edwards is going to take the emotion of anger, put it on the table, and just start dissecting it. He wants to know, what's the tissue of righteous anger?
Okay.
And where does it turn cancerous? Because let's be honest, we all get angry. But Edwards is going to ask, is your anger holy, or is it just your ego on fire?
And both of us, coming from a Reformed perspective, holding to the Westminster Confession, we know that the heart is deceitful above all things. We need this kind of surgery.
We do. We're experts at justifying our own outbursts.
Yeah.
Edwards comes in and just removes all the excuses.
So let's start where Edwards starts. He poses a very valid question right out of the gate. Is all anger sin? Because the text he's preaching on is 1 Corinthians 13.5. Charity is not easily provoked. Well, if love isn't provoked, does that mean a Christian should just never get angry?
It's the obvious starting point, isn't it? If you look at the landscape of modern psychology or even just casual conversation, anger is often treated in one of two ways. Either it's just an emotion you need to let out so it doesn't poison you, that whole catharsis model, or in some Christian circles, it's seen as a complete failure of character.
Right, the nice Christian syndrome. Just smile, suppress everything, and pretend it's all fine.
Edwards rejects both of those. He looks at Scripture and he sees a tension. On one hand, you have verses that seem to condemn anger completely. Ecclesiastes says anger rests in the bosom of fools.
Right.
But then you have Ephesians 4.26, be ye angry and sin not.
Which is a command. It's an imperative. It's not a suggestion.
Precisely. It implies that there is a species of anger that is actually compatible with holiness. If God can be angry, and Scripture says he is angry with the wicked every day, and if Jesus can be angry.
Which he was.
He was, specifically at the hardness of men's hearts in Mark chapter 3. So if God and Jesus can be angry, then anger itself cannot be intrinsically evil.
Okay, so there's a category for it. So how does Edwards define it? What's the baseline definition of anger before it goes wrong?
He defines it as an earnest, violent opposition of spirit against a real or supposed evil.
Okay, stop there. That word violent,
Yeah.
that carries a lot of baggage. I mean, if I'm just sitting in traffic and I'm frustrated, I don't feel violent. Is he saying all anger has to be explosive?
No, not explosive in the sense of, throwing a punch, but violent in the older sense of the word, meaning forceful, intense.
Okay.
Think of it like a physiological reaction. When you see something wrong, your spirit doesn't just sit there passively. It rears up. It pushes back. That internal push is what he means by violence.
So it's an active stance. It's the soul bracing itself against something it perceives as wrong.
Correct. But he makes some very important distinctions here to clear away the debris. First, he says it's not just a difference of opinion. You can disagree with someone coolly. That's just judgment. That's not anger.
Right. I could disagree with your tax policy without my blood pressure shooting up.
Right.
Ideally.
Ideally. Second, he distinguishes it from grief. Grief is opposition to what he calls natural evil, suffering, pain, loss. You hate the cancer that took your friend, but you're not angry at the cancer in a moral sense. Anger, for Edwards, is specifically the spirit stirred against moral evil. It's a reaction to a fault in a voluntary agent.
Someone who should know better. Someone who made a choice.
Yes. Someone acting by their own will to do something wrong. That is the specific trigger for this kind of anger.
He uses an illustration here that I found incredibly helpful to distinguish this valid anger from the sinful kind. It's the one about the father and the child.
It is the crucial illustration to understand his entire point. Imagine a father watching his child behave badly. Maybe the child is running toward a busy street, or maybe the child is being deliberately cruel to a sibling.
Okay.
The father sees this and his spirit is stirred. He opposes that behavior. He is, by definition, angry at the conduct.
But he loves the kid. He doesn't hate the child.
That is the key. His anger is completely consistent with goodwill. He doesn't want the child to be destroyed. He wants the child to be corrected. He wants the child's ultimate welfare. And Edwards uses this to prove that the essence of anger is opposition to evil, not desire for revenge.
That is a massive distinction.
Yeah.
I think most of us, when we get angry, we instantly want the other person to hurt a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, we want them to feel what we feel.
And that is the exact point where we cross the line. That's where we leave the be angry and sin not territory. And we enter the territory of what he calls undue or unsuitable anger.
Okay.
And this is where the sermon gets really, really practical. Edwards breaks down 4 specific defects, 4 ways our anger goes completely off the rails.
Let's walk through these,
Yeah.
because I think this serves as a checklist for our own consciences. The first defect is a defect in nature.
This goes right back to what we just touched on, the difference between justice and revenge. Edwards argues that if your anger contains ill will or a desire for the other person to suffer for the sake of your own satisfaction, it is unchristian, full stop.
He quotes Romans 12.19 here. "Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord."
That is the boundary line. There is a critical distinction between public justice and private revenge. A magistrate, a judge, a police officer acts as an agent of God's justice. They punish evil not for their own personal satisfaction, but for the safety of society and the glory of God.
So a judge sentencing a criminal isn't doing it because he personally hates the guy.
Hopefully not.
He's doing it because the law requires it for the good of the whole.
Right. Ideally, the judge wishes the criminal could be rehabilitated and saved even while passing the required sentence. But private individuals, we're not judges. We are commanded to wish to do all, even our enemies.
That is the hard part. Matthew 5.44, love your enemies. It's so easy to say, but so hard to do when someone has actually hurt you.
And Edwards is rigorous here. He says, if there is any malice, if you are secretly hoping they fail, hoping they get sick, hoping they lose their job, that is a defect in the very nature of your anger. It has become poison.
It really rules out the whole concept of a grudge, doesn't it?
It does.
Because a grudge is basically just keeping a little pet monster of ill will in your pocket, waiting for the other person to trip up so you can feel good about it.
A grudge is a desire for revenge on a layaway plan. You're just waiting for the final payout. And Edwards says that is completely incompatible with the spirit of charity.
Wow.
If you are angry, but you still genuinely want the best for that person's soul and life, your anger might be righteous. But the moment you start fantasizing about their downfall, you have sinned.
Okay, so that's the nature of the anger. The second defect is a defect in occasion. This is basically getting mad at the wrong things.
Or getting mad when there is no just cause at all. And Edwards breaks this down into some fascinating scenarios. The first is what he calls getting angry, where there is no fault.
Okay, what does that mean?
This is when we get angry at someone for things that are completely beyond their control.
Like ignorance, or just not being physically able to do something.
Right. You ask someone to do a task and they physically can't do it, or they genuinely didn't know how, and you blow up at them. Edwards says that's totally irrational. You're demanding omnipotence or omniscience from a fellow fallen human being.
That's a good point. But let's look at the second scenario he outlines under occasion, because this is the one that I think actually condemns most of us, if we're honest. He talks about being angry at the providence of God.
This is a heavy one. Yeah.
He talks about fretting when business goes wrong or when our plans get disrupted. Basically, getting mad at bad luck.
And he uses such strong language there. He calls it horribly wicked.
Horribly wicked. I mean, that feels like an overreaction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm just annoyed that it's raining on my vacation.
Yeah.
Or that the car broke down again.
Yeah.
I'm not, kicking puppies. Why does he escalate it to wickedness?
This is where you have to follow the chain of command. Edwards is a rigorous logician. He asks, who ordered the rain?
Who decided that the flight would be delayed? Who holds the mechanical workings of your car in his hands?
Theologically, we'd say God. He ordains whatsoever comes to pass. That's the Westminster Confession right there.
Exactly. So the rain isn't a sentient being. The rain is a tool. If you get angry at the hammer for hitting your thumb, you're being irrational. But if you know the hammer is being swung by a master carpenter and you get angry at the blow, who are you actually angry at?
You're angry at the carpenter.
Precisely. Edwards argues that all fretfulness against our circumstances is, at its root, a direct accusation against God's management of the universe.
Wow.
It is us standing up and saying, God, you are doing a bad job. If I were on the throne, I would have made it sunny today.
So my road rage is actually theological rebellion.
In Edwards' view, yes.
Yeah.
It's practical atheism. It is acting as if God has left the building, or worse, that he is incompetent and uncaring. Edwards says if we truly loved God, if we had that spirit of charity, we would be so content with his will that these crosses in our path wouldn't provoke us to wrath. That really puts things in perspective. It makes me want to be a lot more careful about what I complain about, even in my own head.
It should make us all tremble a bit. It's a high standard.
Then he mentions getting angry at people for doing well.
This seems completely counterintuitive, but it happens all the time. This is getting angry at someone for doing their duty.
Like the Pharisees getting angry at Christ for healing on the Sabbath.
Exactly. He was healing, he was exposing their hypocrisy, he was doing the will of the Father, and they were absolutely furious about it.
Okay, but bring that closer to home.
What about when a fellow church member offers a valid, loving reproof?
Oh, nobody likes that.
See?
Let the righteous smite me, the psalmist says, but usually when the righteous smite us, we bite back. Hard.
We do. We get angry at the person for pointing out a sin, even though they are doing us a great kindness. We are angry at them for well-doing. Or look at the prophet Jonah.
Right.
He was angry at God. Why? Because God showed mercy to the city of Nineveh. Jonah was angry at God's goodness.
That is a terrifying thought.
Yeah.
To be angry at goodness itself?
It's the ultimate inversion of values. When your heart is so twisted that virtue looks like a vice to you, you are in a very dangerous place.
Then there's the third scenario under occasion, which I think is probably the most common one for the average listener, the trivialities.
The peevish disposition. This is the person who is just constantly put out of humor by small things. The toast is burnt, the kids are being too loud, the internet is slow.
We've all been there.
We have. And Edwards gives a reality check here that is so refreshing in its bluntness. He basically says, we live in a world where we will constantly see faults in others because there are faults in ourselves.
In other words, get over it.
Essentially, he says if you are going to be angry at every little defect you see in the world or in other people, you will never have a moment's peace. You will live in a constant state of fretfulness. And that is not the spirit of Christ. It's a spirit of entitlement. You believe you are entitled to a frictionless existence.
And there's a litmus test he gives here that I found really, really helpful for diagnosing this defectification. It's the self versus God test.
This is the core of the Reformed diagnosis of the fallen human heart. Edwards argues that we should only be angry at sin as sin.
What does that mean, as sin?
It means we should be angry because God's honor is offended, because his law is broken. But the reality, we are usually calm as a cucumber when God is blasphemed or his commands are ignored in the public square. But the moment our own reputation is touched, the moment our own interest is threatened, we go nuclear.
So if someone breaks God's law across the world, I sleep just fine. If someone cuts me off in traffic, I'm ready to fight.
That proves, according to Edwards, that your anger is not Christian zeal. It is just selfish passion. True zeal is moved by offenses against God. Sinful anger is moved by offenses against me.
That's a hard mirror to look into.
It is. It strips away that mask of righteous indignation we all love to wear.
Okay, moving on to the third defect, defect in end. This is about the why. Why are we getting angry? What's the goal?
And first, Edwards identifies rashness here. This is anger without a goal. It's just an explosion, a reaction.
Just venting?
Exactly. He compares it to the blind passion of beasts. An animal gets hurt, it bites, it doesn't think, it doesn't have a strategy. Edwards says we are rational creatures. Our faculties should be governed by reason. If you just explode without thinking, what good will this do? What am I trying to achieve here? Then you are acting beneath your God-given nature.
And then there are the sinful ends, using anger as a tool.
This is manipulative anger. And we see this in toxic relationships or even in leadership sometimes, using anger to gratify pride, using anger to establish dominance. I will raise my voice so you know I am the boss. I will get angry so you back down and give me what I want. That is using a passion to serve the idol of self-aggrandizement.
It's bullying, essentially.
It is bullying sanctified by the excuse of being emotional or passionate. But Edwards calls it what it is. A defect in the end. The goal is wrong. You aren't trying to correct a wrong, you are trying to win.
Finally, the fourth defect. Defect in measure. This is about the degree and the duration of the anger.
The degree part is so vivid. He talks about people getting drunk with passion.
Shrunk with it, yeah.
Losing control of their reason and their conduct. You've seen people like this, where their red mist descends and they say things they can't even remember an hour later. Edwards says, when you lose command of yourself, you have sinned, no matter how just the initial cause might have been.
And then the continuance. This is the famous sun going down on your wrath.
Ephesians 4:26 again. And Edwards offers a psychological insight here that I think is just brilliant. He says if anger continues, it changes, it morphs. It stops being a flash of emotion, which might be valid, and it curdles into malice.
It sours.
It becomes a settled hatred. It changes from, I am opposed to this action you did, to, I am opposed to you. And that is where it rests. He quotes Ecclesiastes 7:9, anger resteth in the bosom of fools.
It finds a home there, it moves in.
It moves in, unpacks its bags, and pays rent. And that, Edwards says, is foolishness and it is sin.
So we have these four defects. Nature, occasion, end, and measure. It's a pretty comprehensive list of how we mess this all up. But, being a good theologian, Edwards doesn't just treat the symptoms. He goes for the root. He asks why. Why are we so prone to all of this?
And the diagnosis is classic Edwards. The two great enemies of charity are pride and selfishness.
Let's break those down. How does pride fuel anger? Because I think we often miss that connection. We think of anger as just being mad, not necessarily proud.
Well, think of it this way. Pride increases the surface area of your ego.
I like that image. A bigger target.
A much bigger target. If you are humble, you are small. It's hard to hit a small target. If someone insults you and you already know in your heart of hearts that you are a sinner saved by grace, you think, well, they're not entirely wrong. I am flawed. The arrow passes right through you.
Because you aren't protecting some false image of perfection.
Correct. But pride inflates you. It makes you vast. You fill the entire room. And because you are so great in your own eyes, any little slight, someone cutting you off in traffic, someone looking at you the wrong way, it feels like a massive blow. And because you think you are a king, you interpret that slight as high treason.
So the prouder I am, the more sensitive I become to offense.
Paradoxically, yes. We tend to think of sensitive people as soft, but Edwards would say they're often just immensely proud. They are so obsessed with their own dignity that they can't handle a single scratch on the paint. A humble man is hard to provoke because he doesn't think he deserves better treatment than Jesus got, and Jesus was spat upon.
That is a brutal truth. If I'm easily offended, it's probably because I think I'm more important than I actually am.
It is the math of the ego. That's what it comes down to.
And then selfishness, the second root.
This connects directly to the Reformed view of the fall, what Luther and Augustine called incurvatus in se. Humanity turned inward on itself.
Curved in on itself.
We are malicious because we are seeking our own interests. If we truly sought the common good and God's glory, which is what love does, we would forget ourselves.
We wouldn't take things so personally because we wouldn't be thinking about personally. We'd be thinking about the whole.
We would be too busy looking at God's glory to even notice that someone stepped on our toe. But because we spend all day staring at our own toes, we scream when they get stepped on.
That is a very convicting image.
It changes the entire conversation from, anger management techniques to sanctification of the heart. You can count to 10 all you want, but if you are still proud and selfish on the inside, you are just delaying the explosion. You aren't curing it.
So having laid out the anatomy and the root cause, Edwards holds up a mirror. He moves to application. And he calls us, to examine our consciences in 3 specific areas. And the first one is public and religious life.
This is so relevant for our cultural moment, isn't it? We live in an age of constant outrage, and so often people cloak their anger in the language of virtue. They claim they are angry for the cause of religion or for social justice or for truth.
Zeal mask. I'm not being a jerk. I'm being zealous for the Lord.
Right. And Edward says, okay, let's test that. Are you equally angry when God is dishonored in cases that don't affect your personal standing, your party, or your tribe?
Uh-oh.
Or is your zeal actually just party spirit in disguise?
That is a tough question. If I'm furious when my political opponent lies,
Yeah.
but I, make excuses or look the other way when my guy lies.
Then you are not angry at lying. You are angry at the opposition. That is selfishness, not zeal. Edwards warns that we often act like we are defending God when really we are just defending our team. True zeal is impartial. It burns against sin wherever it finds it, starting with one's own heart.
The second area he points to is the hidden grudge. He uses some incredible imagery here. He talks about the old sore.
He asks, is your anger like an old sore that looks healed on the surface, but the slightest touch, the slightest reminder, brings back all the pain? That implies it never really healed. It just scabbed over. The infection is still there.
And then the image of the autumn leaves.
That one is so poetic and so haunting. He talks about a smothered fire in a heap of autumn leaves. There is no flame visible. It looks calm. It looks dead. But the slightest breeze, a tiny provocation, a word, a look, and suddenly the whole thing bursts back into flame. Why?
Because the heat was there the whole time. It was just smoldering underneath.
He was smoldering, and he asked the listener, has the sun gone down on your wrath? And he doesn't mean just overnight. He says, winter's cold hath not chilled the heat. Summer's sun hath not melted you.
He's talking about grudges held for months or years or even decades.
Yes. He says there are people sitting in the congregation listening to him preach this very sermon who are carrying this burning coal of resentment in their chest. And they think they are fine because they aren't screaming about it. But God sees the heart. If time hasn't healed it, it means you have been secretly feeding it.
Then he moves to the third area, and this is the one that I think probably hurts the most for many people, the family unit.
Edwards identifies the family as the place of closest obligation. These are the people we are covenanted to love and cherish, but he notes the deep irony. It is often the place of our worst behavior.
Why is that? Why are we so much nicer to the barista at the coffee shop than we are to our own spouse or our own children?
Because we let our guard down. We feel we own our family in a certain way. We take them for granted. And Edwards asks directly, are you peevish, fretful, impatient? He talks about being unkind to those who are dependent on you.
That word peevish really sticks out. It's not a word we use much anymore, but it perfectly describes that low-level, constant irritability.
It's the spirit of being easily annoyed. And Edwards points out that your moods affect the entire house. He says those dependent on you are easily made happy or unhappy by what you do or say.
That is a heavy weight of responsibility.
It is. If you come home angry and irritable, you darken the whole house. You are stealing their peace to soothe your own agitation.
We often treat those closest to us with the least amount of charity. We save all our patience for strangers and give the scraps to our family.
Which is the exact opposite of 1 Corinthians 13. Love is supposed to begin at home. If it doesn't work there, it doesn't work anywhere. If you are a saint at church but a devil at the dinner table, Edwards would say your religion is vain.
Okay, so we are diagnosed. We see the defects, we see the root causes, we see the symptoms in our public life, our private grudges, and our families. Now, what is the cure? Edwards offers 4 arguments to dissuade us from this angry spirit.
He's trying to reason us out of our passion. He wants to give us, as it were, cognitive roadblocks to stop the anger before it takes over our mind.
The first argument is hypocrisy and divine mercy.
This is the mote and beam argument from the Sermon on the Mount, put into Puritan language. Edwards says, look at yourself.
Right.
Consider your own failings toward God. You need his mercy every single day. You are a debtor to grace who can never repay the debt. How can you, who are standing under a waterfall of forgiveness, turn around and choke your neighbor for a few pennies?
It's the parable of the unmerciful servant, played out in real life.
Exactly. He also says, consider your failings toward other people. We so often criticize others for the very things we do ourselves. He says self-reflection is the quickest way to cool your anger. It's really hard to be furious at someone for being selfish when you just realized you were being selfish 5 minutes ago.
Humility is the water that puts out the fire of anger.
You have hit the nail on the head. You cannot be haughty and humble at the same time. They are mutually exclusive.
The second argument is personal misery. This is a very pragmatic appeal.
It is. Edwards says anger destroys the comfort of the one who feels it. It's like a storm in your own soul.
An angry man is a miserable man.
Think about the last time you were truly enraged. Did you feel good? Did you feel at peace? No. You felt tight, hot, agitated. You probably couldn't sleep. You couldn't focus. Edwards is just saying, why are you doing this to yourself? You are drinking poison and hoping the other person dies.
The third argument is spiritual hindrance.
This appeals to the Christian's desire for communion with God. Edwards argues that anger unfits a person for religious duties. You cannot pray effectively when you are seething. You cannot read scripture with profit when your mind is just replaying an argument over and over.
He references the command from Jesus. First be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift at the altar.
God is saying, I don't want your worship if you are hating my child. The channel of grace is blocked by the debris of your anger. If you value your walk with God, you have to deal with your anger toward men. It's not optional.
Finally, the fourth argument, social consequences.
This is almost funny in its bluntness. Edwards says angry men are simply unfit for human society. He quotes Proverbs 22. Make no friendship with an angry man.
He calls them a pest of society. That's strong.
A pest. Someone who creates confusion and strife wherever they go. Nobody wants to be around the guy who might explode at any moment. Everyone has to walk on eggshells. You isolate yourself. You become a social pariah. And Edwards is basically asking, is your pride worth your loneliness?
That is a powerful question.
It brings it all back to a choice. You can have your anger or you can have community. You probably can't have both in any meaningful way.
This has been a heavy lift. We have walked through the definition, the defects, the roots, the mirror, and the cure. As we wrap this up, how do we synthesize this? What is the big takeaway from Edwards' anatomy of anger?
I think the summary is that Christian love charity is a spirit of goodwill. It is a spirit that controls the passions, subjecting them to reason, and ultimately to the glory of God. It's not that we never feel that initial flash of emotion,
Right.
but that we do not let it rule us. We do not let it become undue or settle in our hearts.
So we have to watch against the outbursts, but we also have to fight against the principle of anger in the heart, the pride and the selfishness.
We have to kill the root. We have to mortify the pride and selfishness that fuel the fire. And we do that by looking at Christ. Edwards points us to the Lamb of God. Christ was silent under personal injury. He was mocked, beaten, spat upon, and he did not revile in return, but he was zealous for God's house. He overturned the tables in the temple when God's honor was at stake. That's the model.
Silence for self,
Yeah.
zeal for God.
And we usually get it exactly backward, don't we?
Loud for self,
Yeah.
silent for God. We need to flip the script entirely.
You do?
I want to leave the listener with a thought that came to me while reading this. It's a provocative thought, but I think it aligns perfectly with Edwards' logic.
Okay, let's hear it.
Edwards suggests, and Scripture backs this up, that if you hold a grudge, if you have that settled malice, you actually hate that person. You might not use the word I hate you, but your spirit is wishing them ill. And 1 John 3.15 says, whosoever hateth his brother is a murderer.
A murderer.
So, here's the thought. If God defines murder as hatred in the heart, how many of us are walking around as serial killers in the eyes of heaven? We think we are good citizens because we haven't physically broken any laws. But in the spiritual courtroom, are we standing over the bodies of our neighbors, our family members, our coworkers, completely justified by our own sense of rightness?
That is a chilling thought, and it drives us back to the only place we can possibly go, the cross. We need forgiveness for our anger as much as for any other sin.
Absolutely. We hope this deep dive has been helpful to you. This isn't just about being nicer. It is about having a heart that reflects the spirit of love.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening to Reformed Thinking. We will see you next time.